Margaret Whitmore adjusted her designer handbag and checked her Cartier watch as she stepped into the marble lobby of Presbyterian Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. The morning sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden light across her perfectly styled blonde hair. At 42, she embodied the refined elegance that came with generations of old Southern money and social standing. "Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Patterson will see you now," the receptionist announced with practiced deference. Margaret's heels clicked against polished floors as she made her way to the consultation room. The upcoming cardiac surgery had been weighing on her mind, but she took comfort in knowing she'd secured the city's most prestigious cardiac surgeon. Money had its privileges, and she'd used every connection to ensure her procedure would be handled by the best, which, in her world, meant the right kind of people. "Margaret, darling." Dr. Richard Patterson rose from behind his mahogany desk, his silver hair gleaming under office lighting. They'd known each other through Charlotte's country club circuit for years. "I've reviewed your case thoroughly. The mitral valve repair is complex but entirely manageable." "Richard, I need complete honesty." Margaret settled into the leather chair, crossing her legs elegantly. "I want your absolute best team. No compromises, no diversity initiatives, just pure medical excellence. My family's been coming to this hospital for 3 generations. Dr. Patterson nodded knowingly. "Of course, Margaret. Though I should mention we've had some staffing changes. Dr. Marcus Johnson has joined our cardiac team. Harvard Medical, Johns Hopkins residency, exceptional credentials. Is he one of those affirmative action cases?" Margaret interrupted, her voice carrying the practiced sweetness that masked underlying steel. "Richard, you know I'm not prejudiced, but when it comes to my heart, I want proven excellence. Traditional excellence." The doctor's slight pause spoke volumes. "Margaret, all our surgeons meet the highest standards. I'm sure they do." She smiled tightly. "But surely you understand a patient's right to choose. I've seen too many situations where diversity takes precedence over competence. Call it mother's intuition." Dr. Patterson leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "The surgery is scheduled for next Friday. I'll handle the primary procedure personally, as discussed." Margaret felt relief wash over her. This was how things should work, proper people making proper arrangements. The natural order of excellence that had built her family's success for generations remained intact. Wonderful. "And Richard, I do hope you understand my position. It's nothing personal against anyone, of course. I simply believe in proven track records and cultural compatibility in high-stress situations." As she gathered her purse to leave, Margaret caught sight of a newspaper headline about healthcare disparities. She quickly looked away. Such articles always made her uncomfortable, though she couldn't quite articulate why. Some problems simply weren't hers to solve. Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. The following afternoon, Margaret sat in her sunroom overlooking the manicured gardens of her Eastover neighborhood estate. Crystal glasses clinked as she poured sweet tea for her closest friends, Caroline Ashford and Patricia Vanderberg, both pillars of Charlotte's social elite. "Surgery next Friday?" Caroline gasped, setting down her Hermes clutch. "Margaret, you poor dear. At least you're in excellent hands with Richard Patterson." "Absolutely," Margaret nodded, watching her housekeeper, Rosa, quietly arrange fresh hydrangeas in cut crystal vases. "I made certain to request his personal attention. None of these new additions?" "To the staff." Patricia raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Oh, you mean the diversity hires? I've heard Presbyterians been under pressure from the state to increase their minority representation." Margaret's internal voice whispered familiar justifications. It wasn't about race, it was about standards. Her grandfather had built Whitmore Construction into Charlotte's premier development company through meticulous attention to quality. Her father had expanded the business by hiring only proven performers. Excellence recognized excellence, and she'd learned to trust her instincts about people. "It's simply about qualifications," she explained to her friends, her tone reasonable and measured. "When you're talking about heart surgery, you want surgeons trained at the finest institutions with references from the best families. These rush diversity programs don't allow for proper vetting. Caroline nodded vigorously. Exactly. My brother-in-law is on the hospital board at Duke. He says the pressure to meet quotas has led to some questionable hiring decisions. Margaret felt vindicated. These weren't prejudiced thoughts. They were practical concerns shared by educated, successful people. Her social circle consisted of doctors, lawyers, business owners, and community leaders. Surely their collective wisdom carried weight. I've seen what happens when standards slip, Patricia added, stirring artificial sweetener into her tea. My cousin had complications after a procedure in Atlanta. The surgeon was one of those scholarship cases. Very nice, I'm sure. But when push came to shove, the conversation drifted to safer topics. The upcoming charity gala, summer plans in the Hamptons, Patricia's daughter's engagement to a young man from a good family. Margaret found comfort in these predictable discussions, where everyone understood the unspoken rules of their world. Later that evening, as Margaret reviewed financial reports from Whitmore Construction in her home office, she reflected on the day's conversation. Her friends confirmed what she'd always believed. Success came from careful choices and maintaining standards. Her upcoming surgery would proceed smoothly because she'd insisted on quality over political correctness. The grandfather clock chimed 9 times as she closed her laptop. Tomorrow she'd meet with her estate attorney to review final arrangements. Just precautionary measures, but important ones for a woman of her position. Margaret's pre-operative appointment at Presbyterian Medical Center began with familiar efficiency. The cardiac wing buzzed with controlled activity as she navigated hallways, lined with portraits of distinguished physicians, faces that looked reassuringly like the doctors she'd grown up trusting. Mrs. Whitmore, we'll need to complete your pre-surgical checklist, announced Nurse Jennifer Holmes, a competent young woman whose crisp professionalism immediately earned Margaret's approval. Dr. Patterson wanted to ensure everything's perfectly arranged for Friday. Of course. Margaret settled into the consultation chair, her posture conveying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to receiving attentive service. Jennifer, I trust Dr. Patterson has personally selected his entire surgical team? Yes, ma'am. Our cardiac team is exceptional. Dr. Patterson will be primary surgeon and I assume he's chosen appropriately experienced assistants? Margaret's interruption carried polite firmness. I've been very specific about wanting proven excellence. Nurse Holmes hesitated slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, all our cardiac surgeons meet the highest credentialing standards. Dr. Johnson, for instance, completed his fellowship at, I'm sure everyone is technically qualified. Margaret's smile remained pleasant while her tone grew cooler. However, I hope you understand that patients of my standing expect certain assurances about their care teams. The nurse's professional demeanor never wavered, but Margaret noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. Good. Clear communication prevented misunderstandings later. As they reviewed paperwork, Margaret caught a glimpse of a tall figure in surgical scrubs walking purposefully down the hallway. Something about his confident stride and the respectful way staff members nodded to him suggested importance, but she couldn't see his face clearly. Who was that? She asked casually. Dr. Johnson, our newest cardiac surgeon, Nurse Holmes replied. He's been making quite an impression since joining the team 3 months ago. Margaret's internal alarm activated. This must be the diversity hire Dr. Patterson had mentioned. She made a mental note to reiterate her preferences during her final consultation tomorrow. I see, she said carefully. Well, I'm confident Dr. Patterson has everything properly organized. The remainder of the appointment proceeded smoothly. Blood work, EKG, anesthesia consultation with Dr. William Chen, another physician whose credentials and manner immediately put her at ease. This was how medical care should function: systematic, professional, with clear hierarchies and proven expertise. As Margaret prepared to leave, she overheard 2 nurses discussing weekend plans near the elevators. Did you catch Dr. Johnson's presentation yesterday? One asked. The way he explained that new valve repair technique, absolutely brilliant. He's revolutionizing our approach to complex cases, the other replied. 3 successful repairs this week that other surgeons thought were inoperable. Margaret quickened her pace toward the parking garage. Hospital gossip rarely reflected actual competence. She'd learned long ago to trust established reputations over popular opinions. Friday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth for early October in Charlotte. Margaret's private room at Presbyterian Medical Center overlooked the hospital's memorial garden, where early autumn light filtered through changing leaves. Her sister Victoria had driven down from Raleigh to provide support, along with Margaret's longtime family attorney, James Mitchell. "The procedure should take 3 to 4 hours," Victoria said, reviewing discharge instructions. "Dr. Patterson assured me everything is perfectly arranged." Margaret felt prepared and confident. Her pre-surgical meeting with Dr. Patterson had gone exactly as expected. Reassuring professionalism, detailed explanations, and subtle confirmation that her surgical team would consist of his most trusted colleagues. At precisely 7:30 a.m., the surgical nurse arrived to begin pre-operative preparations. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore. I'm Sarah Chen, your surgical coordinator. We'll be getting you ready for Dr. Patterson's team." "Excellent," Margaret smiled, appreciating Sarah's efficient manner and apparent competence. "I trust Dr. Patterson has everything organized to his specifications." "Absolutely. However, I do need to inform you of one change. Dr. Patterson developed acute gastritis yesterday evening and cannot perform surgery today. The procedure has been rescheduled." "Rescheduled?" Margaret's composure cracked. "That's impossible. I've arranged my entire schedule, my family's schedules." "Mrs. Whitmore, please let me finish." Sarah's voice remained calm and professional. "The procedure will continue as scheduled. Dr. Marcus Johnson will be your primary surgeon." "He's been fully briefed on your case and—" "Absolutely not." Margaret's voice rose sharply. "I specifically arranged for Dr. Patterson. I will not accept some substitute for my cardiac surgery." Sarah's expression remained neutral, but her tone grew firmer. "Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Johnson is not a substitute. He's a board-certified cardiac surgeon with exceptional credentials. More importantly, your surgery cannot safely be delayed. Your cardiac catheterization showed progressive valve deterioration. Then find another surgeon. Dr. Williams, Dr. Morrison, someone with proper experience and background." "Ma'am." Sarah's patience was clearly being tested. "Dr. Johnson has performed over 200 successful mitral valve repairs. His success rate exceeds national averages. He's the most qualified surgeon available today." Margaret felt panic rising in her chest, not about the surgery itself, but about losing control of the situation. This wasn't how things worked in her world. "Money and connections, guaranteed choice and appropriate service. I want to speak with the hospital administrator. I want other options. I will not have my life placed in the hands of someone I don't know, whose background I can't verify." "Mrs. Whitmore," a deep, calm voice interrupted from the doorway. "May I speak with you?" Margaret looked up to see the tall figure she'd glimpsed in the hallway days earlier. Dr. Marcus Johnson stepped into her room with quiet authority, a man in his late 30s with kind but serious eyes and hands that radiated competence and strength. "I understand you have concerns about today's surgical arrangements," he continued, his voice carrying no defensiveness, only professional clarity. "Would you like me to explain my qualifications and approach to your procedure?" Margaret stared at him, her prepared objections suddenly feeling hollow and exposed under his steady gaze. For the first time in years, she found herself truly speechless. The silence in Margaret's hospital room stretched for nearly 30 seconds as she processed the reality standing before her. Dr. Marcus Johnson waited patiently, his presence filling the space with quiet confidence that somehow made her elaborate objections seem petty and inadequate. Margaret began, then stopped. Her usual arsenal of polite demands and subtle authority felt suddenly inappropriate. "This is very unexpected." "I understand completely," Dr. Johnson replied, pulling up a chair beside her bed. "Major surgery is stressful enough without last-minute changes. May I walk you through my background and our plan for your procedure?" Victoria shifted uncomfortably in the corner, clearly sensing the tension but uncertain about its source. Sarah Chen remained by the doorway, professional but watchful. Margaret's mind raced through internal justifications. This wasn't about race, it was about familiarity, proven relationships, known quantities. But as Dr. Johnson began speaking, his words carried undeniable authority. "I completed my residency at Johns Hopkins under Dr. Patricia Yamamoto, one of the world's leading cardiac surgeons. My fellowship focused specifically on mitral valve repair techniques. I've published 12 peer-reviewed papers on innovative approaches to complex valve reconstruction. Each credential landed like a small weight in Margaret's chest. These weren't participation trophies or diversity quotas. They represented years of rigorous training and proven excellence. "Your case is particularly interesting," he continued, reviewing her chart. "The posterior leaflet prolapse combined with annular dilatation requires precise technique. I've successfully completed 47 similar repairs in the past 18 months, with 0 mortality and a 96% long-term success rate." Margaret found herself listening despite her resistance. His explanation was detailed, confident, and somehow reassuring in ways that Dr. Patterson's more general assurances had not been. "Mrs. Whitmore, I want you to feel completely comfortable with today's procedure. If you prefer to wait for Dr. Patterson's recovery, we can discuss that option. Though I should mention that delaying surgery for more than 2 weeks significantly increases your risk profile." The genuine concern in his voice caught Margaret off guard. He wasn't pushing or demanding. He was simply presenting medical facts and offering her choice. I need a moment to think," she said quietly. "Of course. I'll be available whenever you're ready to discuss further." Dr. Johnson stood to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Whitmore, I know this situation isn't what you planned, but I want you to know that your well-being is my only priority today. Everything else is secondary." After he left, Victoria approached Margaret's bedside. "Maggie, what was that about?" "He seems incredibly qualified." Margaret stared at the ceiling, her thoughts churning. 40 years of assumptions were colliding with an uncomfortable reality. Every instinct she'd developed about people, every social shorthand she'd relied upon, suddenly felt unreliable. Her phone buzzed with text messages from Caroline and Patricia asking about the surgery. How could she explain this situation without revealing the depth of her assumptions? More troubling, why did those assumptions suddenly feel so exposed and inadequate? "Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. 20 minutes later, Margaret heard voices outside her room. Dr. Johnson speaking quietly with someone in the hallway. Curiosity overrode her discomfort as she strained to listen. "Mrs. Rodriguez in 314 is asking for you specifically," a nurse was saying. "Her family drove up from Colombia because they heard you were handling her husband's surgery." "Of course," Dr. Johnson replied. "Let me speak with them before I prep for Mrs. Whitmore's procedure." Margaret watched through her partially open door as Dr. Johnson entered the room across the hall. She could see an elderly Hispanic woman surrounded by a large, anxious family, children, grandchildren, all wearing the careful, uncomfortable clothes that marked them as working-class people navigating an unfamiliar environment. "Doctora Johnson," the elderly woman said, reaching for his hands. "Gracias a Dios, you are here for mi esposo." Margaret was struck by how naturally Dr. Johnson switched to fluent Spanish, his formal medical demeanor softening into warmth without losing its authority. He knelt beside the woman's chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Señora Rodriguez, your husband's surgery went perfectly. The bypass was successful and he's recovering ahead of schedule. His heart is strong, like his wife, no?" The woman began crying, tears of relief and joy. The family crowded around Dr. Johnson, asking rapid-fire questions in a mixture of English and Spanish. Margaret noticed how he answered each person individually, his attention never wavering despite the chaotic scene. "Doctor, will Papa be able to work again?" a young man asked. "He's been painting houses for 30 years. We'll get him back to full activity," Dr. Johnson assured him. "But first he needs to follow cardiac rehabilitation. I've arranged for him to work with Maria Santos, our best Spanish-speaking therapist." Margaret watched, mesmerized, as Dr. Johnson spent 15 minutes with the Rodriguez family, explaining procedures, reassuring grandchildren, even looking at photos on someone's phone. His genuine care was evident in every gesture and word. As he prepared to leave, Señora Rodriguez grabbed his sleeve. "Doctor, you saved my husband's life. But more than that, you made us feel like people, not just charity cases. God bless your hands and your heart." Margaret felt something shifting inside her chest. Not physical discomfort, but emotional recognition. The way Dr. Johnson had treated this working-class family wasn't condescending charity. It was respect, pure and simple. When he returned to the hallway, Margaret called out softly, "Dr. Johnson?" He appeared in her doorway immediately. "Yes, ma'am? That was beautiful," she said, surprising herself with her honesty. "The way you cared for that family." "Mrs. Rodriguez's husband had a complex case," he replied simply. "When people trust you with their lives, you honor that trust completely. Every patient, every time." Something in his simple, straightforward response cracked through Margaret's defensive barriers. This wasn't about quota systems or diversity initiatives. This was about a man who treated every human being, regardless of their background, with dignity and excellence. "Dr. Johnson," she said quietly, I think I'm ready to discuss my surgery." He smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him, and pulled up the chair beside her bed. "I'm honored by your trust, Mrs. Whitmore. Let's get your heart fixed." Word of Margaret's surgical assignment spread quickly through her social circle. By noon, her hospital room phone had rung 6 times. Caroline, Patricia, Victoria's husband Robert, and several other concerned friends who'd heard about the situation and wanted to offer support. "Margaret, darling, I spoke with Richard Patterson personally." Caroline's voice carried barely concealed urgency. "He's feeling much better and could possibly perform your surgery Monday. Wouldn't that be worth a small delay?" Margaret found herself hesitating in ways that felt foreign. "Caroline, Dr. Johnson explained that waiting could increase complications." "Oh, sweetheart, they always say that. It's liability protection. Richard has known you for 15 years. He understands your preferences about these matters." The word preferences hung in the air like expensive perfume masking something unpleasant underneath. Margaret's internal voice began its familiar chorus. Caroline was right. Family connections mattered. Cultural compatibility during stress was important. Her grandfather would never have entrusted family welfare to unknown quantities. Her sister Victoria returned from lunch carrying coffee and wearing a concerned expression. "Maggie, I've been thinking. Maybe we should call Daddy's old friend at Duke Medical. Dr. Harrison might have recommendations." "Victoria, the surgery is in 3 hours, which is exactly why we need to act quickly." Victoria's voice carried the same authoritative tone that had governed their childhood. "This isn't the time for social experiments. This is your heart." Margaret felt the weight of generations of family expectations pressing down on her. The Whitmores had built their success through careful choices and calculated risks. They'd prospered by knowing which people to trust and which institutions to support. Abandoning those principles during a medical crisis seemed like betraying everything her family represented. At 2 p.m., her phone rang again. This time it was James Mitchell, her family attorney. "Margaret, I've been researching this Dr. Johnson." His voice carried professional concern. "His credentials are impressive, certainly, but I found some interesting information. He's been involved with several community activism groups, healthcare equity initiatives, racial justice organizations. Are you comfortable with a surgeon who might have political motivations?" The question lodged in Margaret's mind like a splinter. She hadn't considered that Dr. Johnson might view her as a symbol rather than a patient. What if her surgery became some kind of statement about healthcare access or social justice? "James, what exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm simply saying that when someone's politics involve challenging traditional power structures, it raises questions about their objectivity. Would you want your procedure to become part of someone's larger agenda?" After ending the call, Margaret sat in her hospital bed feeling more confused than ever. Her social world was unified in its concern, offering reasonable alternatives and legitimate questions. These weren't prejudiced people. They were successful, educated individuals looking out for her welfare. But something about Dr. Johnson's interaction with the Rodriguez family kept returning to her thoughts. The genuine care he'd shown had felt completely apolitical, simply human. The internal battle between her inherited wisdom and her direct observation was becoming exhausting. In 3 hours, she would need to make a choice that would either validate 40 years of social understanding or force her to question everything she'd been taught about excellence and worth. At 3 p.m., Dr. Johnson returned to Margaret's room for final pre-operative consultation. Victoria had stepped out to make phone calls, leaving Margaret alone with her thoughts and mounting anxiety. When he entered, she noticed the quiet strength he carried, not arrogance or showmanship, but the calm confidence of someone completely comfortable with his abilities. "Mrs. Whitmore, how are you feeling about everything?" Margaret studied his face, searching for signs of the political agenda James Mitchell had suggested. Instead, she found only professional concern and genuine warmth. "Dr. Johnson, may I ask you something directly?" "Of course. My friends and family have raised some concerns. Not about your medical qualifications, those are clearly exceptional, but about your background, your motivations." She felt foolish even voicing the questions, but needed to address them. "I've heard you're involved with community activism, healthcare equity issues." Dr. Johnson leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you asking whether I see patients as medical cases or political statements?" "I suppose I am." He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I grew up in rural Alabama. My father worked 3 jobs to support our family: maintenance at the hospital, weekend security, lawn care for wealthy families. When I was 12, he had a heart attack." Margaret found herself listening intently, drawn into his story despite her reservations. The emergency room kept him waiting for 4 hours while treating other patients with less severe conditions. By the time they took him seriously, the damage was extensive. He lived, but he never fully recovered. Dr. Johnson's voice remained steady, but Margaret caught the underlying emotion. "The doctor who finally treated him was excellent, Dr. Sarah Williams, a black woman who became my inspiration for medicine." "That must have been terrifying for your family." "It was. But here's what I learned. Dr. Williams didn't see my father as a statement about healthcare equity. She saw him as a human being who deserved excellent care. That's how I see every patient who trusts me with their life." Margaret felt something loosening in her chest. Not physical, but emotional. "But surely you understand why people might wonder about motivations when social issues are involved?" Dr. Johnson nodded slowly. "Mrs. Whitmore, I believe every person deserves the best medical care available, regardless of their background. That's not politics. That's the Hippocratic Oath. When I'm in that operating room, the only thing that matters is performing perfect surgery." His simple directness cut through weeks of complicated social maneuvering and political speculation. This wasn't about agendas or statements. It was about a doctor who viewed healing as a sacred responsibility. "Dr. Johnson, I need to be honest with you," Margaret said quietly. "I've spent my entire life believing that excellence came from particular backgrounds, specific institutions, familiar networks. The idea of entrusting my life to someone outside those circles felt dangerous. And now?" Margaret considered the question seriously. "Now I'm wondering if I've confused familiarity with excellence, comfort with competence." Dr. Johnson smiled, not triumphantly but with understanding. "Mrs. Whitmore, in 2 hours I'm going to repair your mitral valve with precision and care that honors both your trust and my training. Nothing else matters." For the first time in days, Margaret felt genuine peace about her upcoming surgery. Not because her social world would approve, but because she finally recognized true medical excellence when she encountered it. At 4:30 p.m., just 90 minutes before Margaret's scheduled surgery, the hospital room erupted in controlled chaos. Victoria returned from her phone calls with reinforcements. Their cousin Bradley Whitmore, a prominent Charlotte attorney, and family friend Dr. Edmund Morrison, a pediatric surgeon at Charlotte Medical Center. "Margaret, we may have found a solution," Bradley announced, his courtroom presence filling the small space. "Dr. Morrison has contacted Dr. Patricia Williams at Carolina's Medical. She's willing to perform your surgery tomorrow morning." Dr. Morrison, a distinguished man in his 60s, approached Margaret's bedside with practiced bedside manner. "Margaret, dear, I've known your family for 20 years. Patricia Williams trained at Mayo Clinic, served on the American Heart Association board. She's precisely the kind of surgeon your father would have chosen." Margaret felt the familiar comfort of her social world closing ranks around her. These were people who understood proper protocols, appropriate choices, cultural compatibility. Dr. Morrison's reassuring presence reminded her of family physicians from her childhood, authoritative figures who made complex medical decisions feel manageable. "The transfer could be arranged within the hour," Bradley continued. "I've already spoken with Presbyterian's administration. They understand that patients have rights to choose their care providers." Victoria squeezed Margaret's hand. "Maggie, doesn't this feel right? Dr. Williams has connections to our world. She understands how to treat families like ours." Margaret was about to respond when angry voices erupted in the hallway. Through her partially open door, she could see Dr. Johnson speaking urgently with someone, a young black woman in scrubs who appeared agitated and upset. "Dr. Johnson, they're saying Mrs. Patterson in 318 might not make it," the woman was saying. "Her family is asking specifically for you. The internal bleeding is getting worse. Contact Dr. Williams immediately," Dr. Johnson replied. "If I'm not available, she's the next most qualified surgeon for that case. Dr. Williams is in surgery until midnight. Dr. Chen doesn't have experience with emergency cardiac procedures." "Sir, they need you." Margaret watched as Dr. Johnson ran his hands through his hair, clearly torn between competing responsibilities. "Mrs. Patterson," she recognized the name. Eleanor Patterson, wife of a prominent local minister, mother of 5 children. The family had been featured in the Charlotte Observer's Community Spotlight just last month. "What about Mrs. Whitmore's surgery?" the nurse continued. "Mrs. Whitmore has other options," Dr. Johnson said quietly. "Mrs. Patterson doesn't have time for transfers or delays." Margaret felt something crack inside her chest. Dr. Johnson was prepared to give up her surgery, the prestigious procedure with the wealthy patient, to save the life of someone who might not have insurance, connections, or alternatives. This wasn't about quotas or political statements. This was about a doctor who prioritized human life over social status. "Bradley," Margaret said suddenly, "I need everyone to leave." "Margaret, what are you—" "Everyone out, now!" Her voice carried an authority that surprised even her. "I need to speak with Dr. Johnson." After the room cleared, Margaret called out, "Dr. Johnson, could you please come here?" He appeared in her doorway, his expression conflicted. "Mrs. Whitmore, I need to be honest. I have a patient in critical condition." "I know," Margaret interrupted. "I heard. And I need you to go save Mrs. Patterson's life." "Ma'am, you're going to perform my surgery first, quickly and perfectly, and then you're going to save Eleanor Patterson. Because that's who you are, a doctor who doesn't choose between patients based on their last names or bank accounts." Dr. Johnson stared at her for a moment, then smiled with genuine admiration. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you sure?" Margaret felt clarity settling over her like peaceful morning light. "Dr. Johnson, I trust you completely. Fix my heart, then go save someone else's life. That's what real doctors do." 2 hours later, Margaret drifted back to consciousness in the post-operative recovery unit. The surgical anesthesia was wearing off gradually, leaving her aware of gentle monitoring sounds and the soft bustle of medical activity around her. Her chest felt tight from the incisions, but the irregular heartbeat that had troubled her for months was gone, replaced by strong, steady rhythm. "Good evening, Mrs. Whitmore," a familiar voice said softly. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Johnson appeared at her bedside, still wearing surgical scrubs but looking remarkably energetic for someone who'd just completed 2 complex cardiac procedures. "My heart," Margaret whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "It feels different, strong." "The repair was textbook perfect," he smiled. "Your valve is functioning beautifully. All vital signs are excellent. You're going to make a complete recovery." Margaret studied his face, reading exhaustion mixed with satisfaction. "Mrs. Patterson, she's stable. The emergency repair was successful. She'll be in ICU for monitoring, but I expect full recovery." "You saved 2 lives tonight." Dr. Johnson shook his head. "I did my job. Both patients trusted me with their lives, and that trust deserves everything I have to give." Margaret felt tears beginning to form, not from physical discomfort, but from emotional recognition of something profound she'd nearly missed. "Dr. Johnson, I owe you an enormous apology. Mrs. Whitmore, please let me finish." She struggled to sit up slightly, needing to meet his eyes directly. "I spent weeks trying to avoid you based on nothing more than assumptions and prejudices I'd inherited from my family and social circle. I nearly missed being treated by one of the finest doctors I've ever encountered." Dr. Johnson pulled up a chair beside her bed. "Mrs. Whitmore, everyone brings their life experiences into medical situations. Fear makes people want familiar comfort. That's completely understandable, but it's not acceptable," Margaret said firmly. "I judged your competence based on your appearance. I questioned your qualifications based on my limited understanding of merit and excellence. I was wrong, and that wrongness could have cost both of us something important. The recovery room was quiet, except for gentle monitoring sounds and distant hospital activity. Margaret felt like she was waking up from more than just anesthesia. She was emerging from years of comfortable assumptions that had insulated her from recognizing true worth. Dr. Johnson, what you did tonight, prioritizing Mrs. Patterson's emergency while still providing me with perfect care, that's real character. That's the kind of person I want to become. What do you mean? Margaret considered her words carefully. I've spent 42 years surrounding myself with people who look like me, think like me, and confirm my existing beliefs. I've mistaken comfort for wisdom and familiarity for excellence. Tonight you showed me what true excellence looks like, and it has nothing to do with backgrounds or social circles. Dr. Johnson leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Whitmore, what you're describing takes tremendous courage. Questioning long-held beliefs isn't easy, but it's necessary, Margaret replied. I want to learn how to recognize worth in people without relying on surface indicators. I want to support real excellence wherever I find it. And I want to use whatever influence I have to ensure that other patients get access to doctors like you. A smile spread across Dr. Johnson's face, genuine warmth mixed with respect. Mrs. Whitmore, I think this surgery repaired more than just your heart. Margaret laughed softly, feeling lighter than she had in years. Dr. Johnson, would you be willing to help me learn? About healthcare equity, about recognizing excellence, about becoming someone whose judgment is based on character rather than assumptions? I'd be honored, he replied. But first, let's get you completely healed. Then we can talk about changing the world. Hello, the Shade of Love family. So happy you're here. Before we jump into the next part of the story, tell us, where are you watching from? Drop your country and state in the comments. Also, how's the story been so far? We love reading your thoughts. Yes, every single comment. And it really keeps us motivated. Let's aim for 50 comments on this video. Think we can hit it? Your support means the world, so don't forget to comment, share, and keep the energy flowing. 3 weeks after her surgery, Margaret sat at the head of the conference table in the executive boardroom of Presbyterian Medical Center. The weekly hospital board meeting was typically a routine affair, but today she'd requested time to address the full board about her recent experience as a patient. Board Chairman Robert Sterling called the meeting to order, his familiar voice carrying the authority of old Charlotte money and established connections. Margaret knew everyone in the room, business leaders, community pillars, and hospital administrators who'd governed Presbyterian Medical Center for decades. Margaret, we're delighted to see you looking so healthy. Robert smiled warmly. I understand you wanted to share some thoughts about your recent procedure. Margaret stood slowly, her recovery still requiring careful movement, but her voice was strong and clear. Thank you, Robert. I'm here to discuss Dr. Marcus Johnson and to address what I believe is a critical issue facing our hospital and our community. She noticed several board members exchanging glances. Dr. Patterson was present, looking uncomfortable, along with several physicians she'd known socially for years. 3 weeks ago, I specifically requested that Dr. Johnson not be assigned to my cardiac surgery. I made this request based on assumptions and prejudices that I'm deeply ashamed to admit. Margaret paused, letting her words settle over the room. I was wrong. Not just mistaken. Morally wrong. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. Margaret could feel the tension building as her peers realized she was about to challenge unspoken but widely held beliefs within their social circle. Dr. Marcus Johnson is the most skilled, compassionate, and professional physician I have ever encountered. His surgical technique was flawless, his bedside manner exemplary, and his character beyond reproach. More importantly, I watched him treat every patient, regardless of their background, with identical excellence and respect. Board member Patricia Vanderberg, Margaret's longtime friend, shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Margaret, dear, I'm sure Dr. Johnson is quite competent. But surely you understand our concerns about maintaining Presbyterian's traditional standards. Patricia, I need to stop you right there, Margaret interrupted, her voice carrying new authority. What we call traditional standards often masked prejudice and exclusion. Dr. Johnson doesn't meet our standards, he exceeds them. By any objective measure of medical excellence. Dr. Patterson cleared his throat. Margaret, I appreciate your positive experience. But hospital administration involves complex considerations beyond individual cases. Richard, with respect, you're wrong. Margaret's tone remained cordial but firm. I've spent the past 3 weeks researching Dr. Johnson's credentials, his patient outcomes, his contributions to cardiac surgery innovation. His success rates surpass every cardiac surgeon in Charlotte, including our most celebrated physicians. She opened the folder she'd brought, distributing copies of documentation she'd compiled. Dr. Johnson has published breakthrough research on minimally invasive valve repair. His techniques have been adopted by cardiac programs at Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, and Johns Hopkins. Presbyterian Medical Center is fortunate to have recruited someone of his caliber. The room buzzed with uncomfortable murmurs as board members reviewed the materials. Margaret could see her social peers struggling to reconcile their assumptions with objective evidence of excellence. Furthermore, Margaret continued, I've learned that several prominent families have specifically requested Dr. Johnson for their cardiac procedures after learning about his reputation. The Hendersons, the Morrisons, the Ashfords, families whose medical choices we've always respected. This information clearly surprised several board members. Social proof from other elite families carried weight in their decision-making processes. Margaret, Robert Sterling interjected carefully, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that Presbyterian Medical Center publicly celebrate Dr. Johnson's contributions to our cardiac program. I'm suggesting we highlight his innovations in our marketing materials and community outreach. And I'm recommending that we examine our hiring and promotion practices to ensure we're attracting the best medical talent regardless of background. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret could see her peers processing the implications of her suggestions, not just for hospital policy, but for their broader social worldview. I'll be making similar recommendations to Charlotte's other medical institutions, Margaret added. Excellence should be recognized and supported wherever it exists. Our community deserves the best health care available, and that means embracing physicians like Dr. Johnson rather than questioning their qualifications based on irrelevant factors. As the meeting concluded, several board members approached Margaret privately. Some expressed admiration for her courage, while others voiced continued reservations. But Margaret felt certain that change had begun, not through confrontation or political demands, but through honest recognition of documented excellence. Her public stand would undoubtedly create ripples through Charlotte's social establishment. Some friendships might be strained, some social invitations might be withdrawn, but Margaret had discovered something more valuable than social comfort, the satisfaction of supporting what was genuinely right rather than what was merely familiar. 6 months later, Margaret stood in the patient garden at Presbyterian Medical Center, watching Dr. Marcus Johnson speak with a young cardiac surgery fellow. The early spring afternoon was warm, and she'd driven to the hospital to attend the dedication ceremony for the new Cardiac Excellence Center, a state-of-the-art facility that would bear Dr. Johnson's name as its inaugural director. Her recovery had been remarkable. Not only was her heart completely healed, but her entire perspective on excellence and worth had been transformed. The journey from prejudice to understanding hadn't been comfortable, but it had been profoundly necessary. Mrs. Whitmore, Dr. Johnson's voice called out as he approached across the garden. I'm so glad you could be here today. I wouldn't miss it, she smiled, genuinely delighted to see him. How does it feel to have your own cardiac center? Overwhelming and humbling, he replied, but mostly exciting. We'll be able to help so many more patients with the new facilities and expanded program. Margaret nodded, remembering the woman she'd been just months earlier, someone who would have questioned whether Dr. Johnson deserved such recognition, someone who would have assumed more established surgeons should have been chosen instead. Dr. Johnson, I need to tell you something, she said. Working with you has changed more than just my heart rhythm. It's changed how I see people, how I recognize worth, how I understand what excellence really means. Over the past months, Margaret had become one of Presbyterian Medical Center's most active board members, advocating for innovative programs and diverse hiring practices. She'd also begun volunteering with healthcare equity initiatives, using her social connections to build bridges between Charlotte's elite community and underserved populations. Mrs. Whitmore, you've become one of our strongest advocates for patient-centered care, Dr. Johnson replied. Your support has made a real difference. I had excellent motivation, Margaret laughed. You literally saved my life, then showed me how to save my character. The dedication ceremony began with remarks from hospital administration, city officials, and medical colleagues. Margaret listened as speaker after speaker praised Dr. Johnson's clinical excellence, research contributions, and commitment to compassionate care. Each testimonial reinforced what she'd discovered that frightening day when she'd nearly rejected the best medical care available. During the reception afterward, Margaret found herself in conversation with the Rodriguez family, the same people she'd observed Dr. Johnson treating with such care months earlier. Senora Rodriguez approached her with shy recognition. "You are the lady from the hospital," she said in careful English. "Dr. Johnson saved your heart too?" "Yes," Margaret replied. "He saved my heart in more ways than one." The elderly woman nodded knowingly. "He is a gift from God. He sees people, not skin color or bank accounts. Just people who need healing." Margaret felt tears forming as she recognized the simple truth in Senora Rodriguez's words. Excellence wasn't complicated. It was about competence, compassion, and character. Everything else was just surface noise created by fear and unfamiliarity. As the afternoon wound down, Dr. Johnson found Margaret again near the hospital entrance. "Mrs. Whitmore, I want to thank you for something," he said. "Your transformation and advocacy have inspired other patients and board members to examine their own assumptions. You've helped create a more welcoming environment for excellent physicians from all backgrounds." "Dr. Johnson, you saved my life when I didn't deserve your excellence," Margaret replied. "The least I can do is ensure other patients don't make my mistake of nearly rejecting the best care available." They walked together toward the parking structure, companionable in their shared understanding of how dramatically both their lives had changed since that October morning. "You know," Margaret said thoughtfully, "my grandfather always told me that true success meant surrounding yourself with excellent people. I just had to learn how to recognize excellence without relying on familiar packaging." Dr. Johnson smiled. "Your grandfather was wise. Excellence comes in many forms, but it's always recognizable once you learn what to look for." As Margaret drove home through Charlotte's tree-lined streets, she reflected on the journey from prejudice to partnership, from assumption to appreciation. Her heart beat strong and steady, not just physically but emotionally and morally as well. She'd learned that healing wasn't just about medical procedures. Sometimes it required the courage to question long-held beliefs, the humility to admit error, and the commitment to support what was truly excellent rather than what was merely comfortable. Dr. Marcus Johnson had given her more than a repaired heart valve. He'd shown her how to repair her character, and in doing so, had helped her become the person she'd always had the potential to be. If only she'd been brave enough to look beyond surface assumptions to recognize the skilled hands and pure heart of a true healer.